But I know that a large number of theater people across the country in several cities that I know of, and these are people that I know individually, these are artists, friends of mine, theater makers, who have been deeply troubled by this reverse migration of workers and what they've seen, the sights that they've seen on the streets. Um, in Bangalore, for instance, amongst others, there are many people like that, but in Bangalore, for instance, my very good friend Abhishek Majumdar, he just abandoned doing any kind of artistic work. And all that he's been doing for the last couple of months is going out to camps, trying to raise money, organizing relief, etc., rations, and so on and so forth. So many people are doing that kind of stuff. Uh, they feel like now is not the time to think about art. Now is the time to try and provide whatever support you can in whatever limited way it can be. Even if you can reach 100 families, do that, you know. But also, I feel like, of course, there are other people who are also creating art. And some people are doing both. Some people are doing this as well as that, and so on. Um, so, not for me to stand in judgment of any of these things, but I do know that that because as theater people, as theater makers, as storytellers, we are alive to society around us, and we are sensitive human beings. We are moved by people's, their plight and their tragedies and their enormous acts of generosity and courage and so on and so forth. All of this moves us. And so, therefore, there is a way in which all of this is going to find its way into artistic creation. Now, I obviously can't say how it's going to happen for whom, but there's no question that you'll see all of this being transformed into some kind of artistic creation as the weeks and months go by. Um, Also, just to say that sometimes, you can't create when you're in the midst of things. It's quite interesting that some of the finest novels about, for instance, the partition have been written three, 2 or 3 decades after the partition, have not been written at that time, you know. Some of the finest novels about the partition have started coming out in the 60s and the 70s, and the 80s, for instance, like Tamas by Beshan Sahni was written almost 30 years after. So the thing is, when there's something so traumatic that you go through, it's very hard to respond to it in that moment. It's not easy. And so the artist does take some time, has to step back, has to have some distance from the intensity of that emotional experience. But also, that distance should not be so great that the umbilical cord that ties you to that emotional experience is snapped. Then what you would produce would be heartless, would have no emotion, would be completely heartless, would just be a mechanical. But if you want to produce art that really moves people, then you must have both distance as well as closeness, as well as proximity. Now, what that would be for particular artists, at what point of time, is something that each artist has to figure out on their own. But I have no doubt about the fact that a lot of these experiences are going to be transformed into art. Absolutely, 100%. All my life, I've been very fond of poetry, and as a younger person, I read a lot of poetry. And then at some point, life takes over, and etc. You stop reading poetry, basically. Um, you know, uh, when the lockdown began, soon after the lockdown began, on a whim, I wasn't even thinking what I was doing, but completely on a whim, one evening I took a picture of some poetry books that I have on my shelf. I took a picture of that and posted it on Instagram and Facebook, and I said, I would be happy to send you one poem every day by a WhatsApp audio message if you would like to sign up for this service. A delivery service, it's a personal delivery service for poetry. It would just be one poem every day. One day it would be in Hindi or Urdu, and one day it would be in English. And I'll just give you the poem itself, no commentary on it, no bhashan baji, no nothing. Just the poem in my voice. No video, nothing. It's just an audio message that goes to you. And I made this offer. And, immediately I started finding that my phone was pinging, and on social media, I was getting responses saying, oh, I'd like to sign up, etc. And I didn't think very much about it. As I said, it was just spontaneous. I made the offer and so on. Then I started doing it. And then I found that, of course, it's not easy because, I mean, it's great fun. But what poem am I going to read tomorrow? And of course, one has to make life, difficult for oneself. So I made this insane rule for myself that I was never going to repeat a poet. So if I read one poet one time, then that's it. I'll not read another poem by the same poet. So every day it's a new poet that I read out. I send out this broadcast thing. Then there's also now we've created a podcast. So every morning the broadcast message goes out to phones, and you can get it early in the morning on your phone. You can listen to it then, later, whatever it is. But then by evening, that same recording also goes up on a podcast, and so on. So this just to say, since you asked me, and really thought I hadn't planned this, but since it's come up, I should just tell you, if any of you want to subscribe to this service, I'm more than happy to add you to either my broadcast list, so you'll get it on WhatsApp, or you can just search for a poem a day by Sudhanva, and you'll find me on Spreaker, you'll find me on Google Podcast, Apple Podcast, YouTube, etc., etc., or lots of these platforms where every day my poems go out. Now, this morning I sent out my 79th poem, so 79th day. And today, by the way, as it happens, I sent out poems by Muhammad Ali, the boxer.
Mm-hmm.
And very few people know, most people don't know, that Muhammad Ali was also a poet. I mean, literally, he composed poetry, literally. It wasn't just that he had a gift of the gab, which of course he had, but he also composed poetry. So this morning I read out 3 poems by Muhammad Ali, short poems, and that was my broadcast. As a result, what has happened is that every day I end up reading poetry for about a couple of hours. And that's become my main staple that I'm reading these days, because every day there's pressure on me. It's great pressure. I love this pressure. But there's pressure on me to find something that I would read the next day.